Hi everyone, I'm Suana and welcome to the Weaves of the Wheel read along. Okay, so you probably saw our 24-hour stories the other day where we asked if you want to continue the read along with the additional prologue Ravens or whether to jump straight into chapter 1. It was such a narrow vote. It was pretty much 50-50 the whole way. And then right at the end, Ravens won by 1 vote. Hello everyone, hi. So one of the things I decided to do, because of the length of Ravens, it is a slightly longer prologue than what the Dragonmount one is. I have recorded it and it's currently uploading on our YouTube channel. So what I would do is after this video is done, I'll put a link in the bio of our page and you can go and watch it at your own pace, because it is quite a long, I mean it's a 45-minute video, so it's going to take a little while to get through. So that way you can speed it up, you can slow it down, you can pause it where you want, if you want to. And then on here we'll just continue with chapter 1 because we have got to get through chapter 1 and chapter 2 by Wednesday to keep up with the What on Prime book club. So out of the world, and we're going into chapter 1, which is an empty road. So this is quite an old version. I've got one of the very old maps in mine. I know people have much more modern map nowadays, but oh well, I'm not changing. I love this book. So I'm going to start with this. I am going to find a natural stopping point because it is a little bit longer and it can take a while. So what we'll do is we'll pick up with the second part of chapter 1 tomorrow, and maybe it might not be me, it might be one of our other community members. Fingers crossed you can hear somebody else pronounce everything completely different to what I do. So let's get going, and any questions afterwards, just drop them in and we'll see if we have time. Okay, so chapter 1, Eye of the World, An Empty Road. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. Born below the ever cloud-capped peaks that gave the mountains their name, the wind blew east, out across the sand hills, once the shore of a great ocean before the breaking of the world. Down it flailed into the 2 rivers, into the tangled forest called the Westward, and beat at 2 men walking with a cart and horse down a rock-strewn track called the Quarry Road. For all that spring should have come a good month since, the wind carried an icy chill, as if it would rather bear snow. Gus plastered Randalthor's cloak to his back, whipped the earth-coloured wool around his legs, then streamed it out behind him. He wished his coat were heavier, or that he had worn an extra shirt. Half the time, when he tried to tug the cloak back around him, it caught him on the quiver, swinging at his hip. Trying to hold the cloak one-handed did not do much good anyway. He had his bow in the other, an arrow nocked and ready to draw. As a particularly strong blast tugged at the cloak of his hand, he glared at his father over the back of the shaggy, brown mare. He felt a little foolish about wanting to reassure himself that Tam was still there, but it was that kind of day. The wind howled when it rose, but aside from that, quiet lay heavy on the land. The soft creak of the axle sounded loud by comparison. No birds sang in the forest. No squirrels chittered from a branch. Not that he expected them, really, not this spring. Only leaves that kept leaf or needle through the winter had any greens about them. Snarls of last year's brambles spread brown web over stone outcrops under the trees. Nettles numbered most among the few weeds. The rest were the sorts with sharp burrs and thorns, or stinkweed, which left a rank smell on the unwary boot that crushed it. Scattered white patches of snow still dotted the ground, where tight clumps of trees kept deep shade. Where sunlight didn't reach, it held neither strength nor warmth. The pale sun sat above the trees to the east, but its light was crisply dark, as if mixed with shadow. It was an awkward morning, made for unpleasant thoughts. Without thinking, he touched the nock of the arrow. It was ready to draw to his cheek in one smooth moment, the way Tam had taught him. Winter had been bad enough on the farms, worse than even the oldest folk remembered, but it must have been harsher still in the mountains, if the number of wolves driven down to the two rivers was any guide. Wolves raided the sheep pens and chewed their way into the barns to get the cattle and horses. Bears had been after the sheep too, where bear had not been seen in years. It was no longer safe to be out after dark. Men were the prey as often as sheep, and the sun did not always have to be down. Tam was taking steady strides on the other side of Bella, using his spear as a walking staff, ignoring the wind that made his brown cloak flap like a banner. Now and again he touched the mare's flank lightly to remind her to keep moving. With his thick chest and broad face, he was a pillar of reality in that morning, like a stone in the middle of a drifting dream. His sun-roughened cheeks might be lined and his hair have only a sprinkling of black among the grey, but there was a solidness to him, as though a flood could wash around him without uprooting his feet. He stumped down the road now impassively. Wolves and bears were all very well. His manner said things that any man who kept sheep must be aware of, but they had best not try to stop Tam Thor getting into Eamon's field. With a guilty start, Rand returned to watching his side of the road, Tam's matter-of-factness reminding him of his task. He was a head taller than his father, taller than anyone else in the district, and had little of Tam in him physically, except perhaps for a breadth of shoulder. Grey eyes and the reddish tinge to his hair came from his mother, so Tam said. She had been an outlander, and Rand remembered little of her aside from a smiling face, though he did put flowers on her grave every year at Beltane in the spring, and at Sunday in the summer. 2 small casks of Tam's apple brandy rested in the lurching cart, and 8 lager barrels of apple cider, only slightly hard after a winter's curing. Tam delivered the same every year to the wine spring inn for use during Beltane, and he had delivered that it would take more than wolves or cold wind to stop him this spring. Even so, they had not been to the village for weeks. Not even Tam travelled much these days, but Tam had given his word about the brandy and cider, even if he had waited to make delivery until the day before festival. Keeping his word was important to Tam. Rand was just glad to get away from the farm, almost as glad about the coming of Beltane. As Rand watched his side of the road, the feeling grew in him that he was being watched. For a while, he tried to shrug it off. Nothing moved or made sound among the trees except the wind, but the feeling not only persisted, it grew stronger. The hairs on his arms stirred, the skin prickled as if it itched on the inside. He shifted his bow irritably to rub at his arms, and told himself to stop letting fancy take him. There was nothing in the woods this side of the road, and Tam would have spoken if there had been anything on the other. He glanced over his shoulder and blinked. Not more than 20 spans back down the road, a cloaked figure on horseback followed them, horse and rider alike, black dull and ungleaming. It was more habit than anything else that kept him walking backward along the cart, even while he looked. The rider's cloak covered him from boot top to the cow, tugged well forward so no part of him showed. Vaguely, Rand thought there was something odd about the horseman, but it was the shadowed opening of the hood that fascinated him. He could only see the vaguest outlines of a face, but he had the feeling he was looking right into the rider's eyes, and he could not look away. Queasiness settled in his stomach, but there was only shadow to see in the hood. But he felt hatred as sharply as if he could see a snarling face. Hatred for everything that lived. Hatred for him most of all, above all things. Abruptly, a stone caught his heel and he stumbled, breaking his eyes away from the dark horseman. His bow dropped to the road, and only an outthrust hand grabbing Bella's harness saved him from falling flat on his back. With a startled snort, the mare stopped, twisting her head to see what had caught her. Tam frowned over Bella's back at him. "Are you all right, lad?" "A rider," Rand said breathlessly, pulling himself upright. "A stranger following us." "Where?" The old man lifted his broad-bladed spear, peered back wearily. "There, down the—" Rand's words trailed off as he turned to point. The road behind was empty. Disbelieving, he stared into the forest on both sides of the road. Bare branched trees offered no hiding place, but there was not a glimmer of horse or horseman. He met his father's questioning gaze. He was there, a man, in a black cloak on a black horse. "I wouldn't doubt your word, lad, but where has he gone?" "I don't know, but he was there." He snatched up the fallen bow and arrow, hastily checked the fletching before re-knocking, and half drew before letting the bowstring relax. There was nothing to aim at. "He was?" Tam shook grizzled head. "If you say so, lad. Come on, then. A horse leaves hoof prints, even on this ground." He stared towards the rear of the cart, his cloak wiping in the wind. "As if we find them, we'll know for a fact he was there. If not, well, these are days to make a man think he's seeing things." Abruptly, Rand realised he had been odd about the horseman. Aside from his being there at all, the wind that beat at Tam and him had not so much as shifted a fold of that black cloak. His mouth was suddenly dry. He must have imagined it. His father was right. This was a morning to prickle a man's imagination. But he did not believe it. Only, how did he tell his father that the man who had apparently vanished into air wore a cloak the wind did not touch? With a worried frown, he peered down into the woods around them. It looked different than it ever had before. Almost since he was old enough to walk, he had run loose in the forest. The ponds and streams of the riverwood, beyond the last farms east of Emansfield, were where he learned to swim. He had explored the sand hills, which many in the Two Rivers said was bad luck, and once he had even gone to the very foot of the Mountains of Mist, him and his closest friends, Matt Corfell and Perrin Ibarra. There was a lot further afield than most people in Emansfield ever went. To them, a journey to the next village, up to Watch Hill or down to Devon Ride, was a big event. Nowhere in all of that had he found a place that made him afraid. Today, though, the Westwood was not the place he remembered. A man who could disappear so suddenly could reappear just as suddenly, maybe even right beside them. "No, father, there's no need." When Tam stopped in surprise, Rand covered his flush by tugging at the hood of his cloak. "You're probably right. No point looking into what isn't there, not when we can use the time getting to the village and out of this wind." "I could do with a pipe," Tam said slowly, "and a mug of ale where it's warm." Abruptly he gave a broad grin. "And I expect you're eager to see a grain." Rand managed a weak smile. Of all things he might want to think about right then, the mayor's daughter was far down the list. He did not need any more confusion. For the past year, she'd been making him increasingly jittery whenever they were together. Worse, she did not even seem aware of it. No, he certainly did not want to add Egwene to his thoughts. He was hoping his father had not noticed he was afraid when Tam said, "Remember the flame, lad, and the void." It was an odd thing Tam had taught him. Concentrate on a single flame and feed all your passions into it. Fear, hate, anger, until your mind became empty, became one with the void. Tam said, and you could do anything. Nobody else in Emansfield talked that way, but Tam won the archery competition at Beltane every year with his flame and void. Rand thought he might have a chance at placing this year himself, if he could manage to hold on to the void. For Tam to bring it up now meant he had noticed, but had said nothing more about it. Tam clucked Bella into motion once more, and they resumed their journey. The older man striding along as if nothing untoward had happened, and nothing untoward could. Rand wished he could imitate him. He tried forming the emptiness in his mind, but it kept slipping away into the images of the black-cloaked horseman. He wanted to believe that Tam was right, that the reader had just been his imagination, but he could remember that feeling of hatred too well. There had been someone. And someone had meant him harm. He did not stop looking back until the peaked, thatched roofs of Emansfield surrounded him. The village lay close onto the westward, the forest gradually thinning until the last few trees stood actually among the stout frame houses. The land sloped gently down to the east, though not without patches of woods, farms and hedge-bordered fields, and pastures quilted the land beyond the village all the way to the riverward, and its tangle of streams and ponds. The land to the west was just as fertile, and the pastures were lush in most years, but only a handful of farms could be found in the westward. Even those few dwindled to none miles short of the sand hills, not to mention the mountains of mist, which rose above the westward tree-tops, distant, but in plain sight from Emansfield. Some said the land was too rocky, as if there were not rocks everywhere in Two Rivers, and others said it was hard luck land. A few muttered that there was no point getting any closer to the mountains than need be. Whatever the reasons, only the hardiest men farmed in the westward. Small children and dogs dodged around the cart in whooping swarms once as it passed the first row of houses. Bella plodded on patiently, ignoring the yelling youngsters who tumbled under her nose, playing tag and rolling hoops. In the last months there had been little of play or laughter from the children. Even when the weather had slackened enough to let children out, fear of wolves kept them in. It seemed the approach of Beltane had taught them how to play again. Festival had affected the adults as well. Broad shutters were thrown back, and in almost every house the goodwife stood in a window, apron tied about her, long braided hair done up in a kerchief, shaking sheets or hanging mattresses over the window-sills. Whether or not leaves had appeared on the trees, no woman would let Beltane come before her spring cleaning was done. In every yard, rugs hang from stretched lines, and children who had not been quick enough to run free in the streets instead vented their frustrations on carpets with wicker beaters. On roof after roof, the goodman of the house clambered about, checking the thatch to see if winter's damage meant calling on old Sen Buey, the thatcher. Several times Tam paused to engage one man or another in brief conversation. Since he and Rand had not been off the farm for weeks, everyone wanted to catch up on how things were out that way. Few westward men had been in. Tam spoke of damage from winter storms, each one worse than the one before, and stillborn lambs, of brown fields where crops could be sprouting and pastures greening, of ravens flocking in where songbirds had come in years before. Grim talk with preparations for Beltane going on all around them, and much shaking of heads. It was the same on all sides. Most of the men rolled their shoulders and said, "Well, we'll survive, the light willing." Some grinned and added, "And if the light doesn't will, we'll still survive." That was the way most Two Rivers people had to watch the hail beat their crop, or the wolves take their lambs and start over. No matter how many years it happened, did not give up easily. Most of those who did were long since gone. Tam would not have stopped for Whit Congar if the man had not come out into the streets, so they had to halt or let Bella run him over. The Congars and the Coplins, the two families were so intermarried, no one really knew where one family let off and the other began, were known from Watch Hill to Devon Ride, and maybe even as far as Tarrant Ferry, as complainers and troublemakers. "I have to get this to Bran Alvirwit," Tam said, nodding to the barrels in the cart, but the scrawny man held his ground with a sour expression on his face. He had been sprawled on his front steps, not up on the roof, though the thatch looked as if it badly needed Master Buey's attention. He never seemed ready to start over, or to finish what he started the first time. Most of the Coplins and Congars were like that, those who were not worse. "What will we do about Nynaeve, Alfor?" Congar demanded. "We can't have a wisdom like that for Emansfield." Tam sighed heavily. "It's not our place, Wit. The wisdom is women's business." "Well, we'd better do something, Alfor. She said we'd have a mild winter and a good harvest. Now, if you ask her what she hears on the wind, she just scowls at you and stomps off." "If you asked her the way you usually do, Wit," Tam said patiently, "you're lucky she didn't thump you with that stick she carries. Now, if you don't mind, this brandy—" "Nynaeve Almira is too young to be wisdom, Althor. If the women's circle won't do anything, then the village council has to." "What business of yours is the wisdom?" went Congar, roared a woman's voice. Wit flinched at his wife as she marched out of the house. Day's Congar was twice as wide as Wit, and a hard-faced woman without an ounce of fat on her. She glared at him with fists on her hips. "You try meddling in women's circle business and see how you like eating your own cooking, which you won't do in my kitchen, and washing your own clothes and making your own bed, which you won't be doing under my roof." But days, Wit whined. I was just... If you'll pardon me, Days, Tam said. Wit, the light shine on you both. He got Bella moving again, leading her round the scrawny fellow. Days was concentrating on her husband now, but any minute she could realise whom it was Wit had been talking to. That was why they had not accepted any of the invitations to stop for a bite to eat or something hot to drink. When they saw Tam, the good wives of Emansfield went on point like hounds spotting a rabbit. There was not one of them who did not know just the perfect wife for the widower with a good farm, even if it was in the westward. Bran stepped along as quickly as Tam, perhaps even more so. He was sometimes concerned when Tam was not around, with no way to escape outside rudeness. Herded onto a stool by the kitchen fire, he would be fed pastries or honey cakes or meat pies, and always the good wife's eyes weighed and measured him as neatly as any merchant's scales and tapes, while she told him that what he was eating was not nearly so good as her widowed sister's cooking or her next to eldest cousin. Tam was certainly not getting any younger, she would say. It was not good. It was good that he had loved his wife so. It boded well for the next woman in his life. But he had mourned long enough. Tam needed a good woman. It was a simple fact, she would say, or something very close, that a man just could not do without a woman to take care of him and keep him out of trouble. Worst of all were those who paused thoughtfully about that point when asked with elaborate casualness exactly how old he was now. Like most Two Rivers folk, Ran had a strong stubborn streak. Outsiders sometimes said it was the prime trait of people in the Two Rivers, that they could give mules lessons and teach stones. The good wives were fine and kindly women for the most part, but he hated being pushed into anything, and they made him feel as if he were being prodded with sticks. So he walked fast, and wished Tam would hurry Bella along. Soon the streets opened into the green, a broad expanse in the middle of the village, usually covered with thick grass. The green this spring showed only a few fresh patches among the yellowish brown of dead grass and the black of bare earth. A double handful of geese waddled about, beadily eyeing the ground, but not finding anything worth pecking, and someone had tethered a milk cow to crop the sparse growth. Towards the west end of the green, the wine spring itself gushed out of a low stone outcrop in a flow that never failed, a flow strong enough to knock a man down and sweet enough to justify its name a dozen times over. From the spring, the rapidly widening wine spring water ran swiftly off to the east, willows dotting its banks all the way to Master Thane's mill and beyond, until it split into a dozen streams in the swampy depths of the waterward. Two low railed footbridges crossed the clear stream of the green, and one bridge wider than the others, and stout enough to bear wagons. The wagon bridge marked where the north road, coming down from Tarrant Ferry and Watch Hill, became the old road leading to Devon's Ride. Outsiders sometimes found it funny that the road had one name to the north and another to the south, but that was the way it had always been, as far as anyone in Emansfield knew, and that was that. It was a good enough reason for Two Rivers people. On the far side of the bridges, the mounds were already building for the Beltane fires. 3 careful stacks of logs, almost as big as houses. They had to be on cleared dirt, of course, not on the green, even sparse as it was. What of festival did not take place around the fires would happen on the green. Near the wine spring, a score of older women sang softly as they erected the spring pole. Shorn of its branches, the straight, slender trunk of a fir tree stood 10 feet high, even in the hole they had dug for it. A knot of girls too young to wear their hair braided sat cross-legged and watched enviously, occasionally singing snatches of the song the women sang. Tam clucked at Bella as if to make her speed her pace, though she ignored it, and Ran studiously kept his eyes from what the women were doing. In the morning, the men would pretend to be surprised to find the pole. Then, at noon, the unmarried women would dance the pole, entwining it with long coloured ribbons, while the unmarried men sang. No one knew when the custom began or why. It was another thing that was the way it had always been. But it was an excuse to sing and dance, and nobody in the Two Rivers needed much excuse for that. The whole day of Beltane would be taken up with singing and dancing and feasting, with time out for foot races and contests in almost everything. Prizes would be given, not only in archery, but for the best with the sling and the quarterstaff. There would be contests at solving riddles and puzzles, at the rope tug and lifting, and tossing weights, prizes for the best singer, the best dancer, the best fiddle player, for the quickest to shear a sheep, and even the best at bowls and at darts. Beltane was supposed to come when the spring had well and truly arrived, the firstborn lands, and the first crop up. Even with the cold hanging on, though, no one had any idea of putting it off. Everyone could use a little singing and dancing. And to top everything, if the rumours could be believed, a grand display of fireworks was planned for the green. And if the first peddler of the year appeared in time, of course, that had been causing considerable talk. It was 10 years since the last such display, and that was still talked about. So I'm going to put it on a natural stopping point there before continuing to the next part, hopefully tomorrow. So there is 10 pages left to go of that chapter, and then hopefully we'll be able to move on to chapter 2 and get that finished by Wednesday. I believe it's 5 p.m. GMT that the What on Prime book club starts, so we're going to aim to have it wrapped up by then. And as I said at the start of this video, I have recorded a reading of Ravens, the additional prologue, and that will be up on YouTube, and I'll put the link in the bio for you to follow, and you can watch that at your own pace, because it is a little bit on the long side, so I don't want to sit for an hour reading something and you needing to go in and out. So Ren, no, keep reading. Yeah, it's 11 o'clock. No, I'm tired. Nice, you're a great reader, very soothing voice, from Jocody. Thank you very much, that's really nice to hear. I am going to have a look through these questions now. I'm just going to scroll through and let's see if there's anything we can answer now. In the meantime, if you want to come and have some discussions with other Wheel of Time fans from all over the world, then we have got some chats right here on Instagram. So they literally just sit inside your inbox, and you can join the discussions with other Wheel of Time fans, anything you like that's Wheel of Time related. And actually we do talk about other fandoms as well, so anything that really takes your fancy, you're quite welcome to open discussions about. You can jump in. You don't need a character. I know we are a bit of known as a storytelling platform, but we do other things as well. So by all means, drop me a DM, tell me that you want to join, and I will get you added ASAP. So let's have a look. So hi to everyone. Really nice to see. Oh, it's really nice to see some people here. Some of you I don't know. Shane says, I've never read Ravens. Yeah, it's, I think I'd only read it once, actually, before today. So I was reading it again and I thought, I don't remember it being this long. And I was a little bit surprised by it. It is sort of a few years before Eye of the World starts. So it's kind of an opening scene of Emansfield and the people within it. So it should be really good to get into that if you haven't read it before. Let's see, what else have we got? Any questions? Oh, excuse me, I just need to take this out. The Blacker Jar, may the 4th be with you. Yes. I have not watched any Star Wars today. Thanks, Disney. Yeah, I think sadly this isn't tea. I'm going to leave it there. Bella, yes. Bella is the creator, fight me. I can't believe Egwene and Rand almost became a thing. It's an interesting one. It's obviously like, would they have... I think it's maybe that expectation. They were first expected to be Tian, and I suppose in that sort of in olden times, that was a very normal thing, that you would be promised to someone to tie families together in duty. And actually, in Ravens, there's some very interesting, because it's from Egwene's point of view, there's some very interesting thoughts that she has about Rand, and whether he would make a good husband and things like that. So it's definitely something I'd recommend going and having a listen to. Kal-El, the first description of the void, yes, the first description. It's good for you Asherman when you're Ashermaning, and I know you need to know about the void. Let's see. My fade will find you soon, Jagan. The great lord will not be denied. Oh, you're still on that. I adore you, Blackajah. You are lovely. The two are so stubborn. Yes, they really, really are. They kind of, they it's very, for me, I always imagined Andor as very British, I suppose. Maybe just being British is kind of that thing. But it is that very British farmers. It's quite a classic thing, and they're very stubborn and very set in their ways. And yeah, it definitely rings in my head. I'm reading my own copy as Suana narrates. Yes, that's the hope. I hope you're reading along, and I'm sorry for every time I make a mistake, especially if the pronunciations are not great. I have been working on it. It's not natural for me to say Egwene. Like, in my head, I don't say it that way, and you'll probably want to punch me in the face with the way I actually do say it, but it's very, very unnatural for me to say it that way. Let's have a look. Putting it out there, any part of topology of smooth manifolds, anyone think absolutely has to be as if the 100 weaves of the test for the shore? There isn't any description, is it? I mean, they say that the 100 weaves are, pretty useless in terms of what they can actually do, but it's just learning how to obviously manipulate the 5 different powers. I wish there was some more information on it, especially for us who are writing as Aes Sedai. And actually having to go through it. I'm sure our Mistress of Accepted, Alina, would love to have something on the 100 weaves, because I'm sure it would make her job a little bit more exciting in terms of when she has to test the Accepted before they get raised up to Aes Sedai. If anyone knows of anything out there where there are any manifolds for that, can you send them to Night Depository, Naran of the White Jar? Thank you very much. For me, Ravens is a good prologue. To be honest, I read it the first time, I read the books, and it's so interesting for the newcomers to the Wheel of Time. Yes, it's definitely quite interesting. I can see that my niece has joined. Hi, Elena. Hi, sweetheart. My niece is watching. We're getting her into the Wheel of Time. So please encourage her. I was explaining to her the different jars today, and she's torn between the yellow and the green. So say hi to Elena, and please make sure you help guide her towards the yellow jar for me. Thank you very much. not that I am of all our jars and none now. Okay. Shane, watch Star Wars. Don't kill me. No, I love Star Wars. I just hate what Disney's done. I'm not going to get into it. Could Two Rivers be like Northern Ireland? It could, yeah. I mean, it's when I said the British thing, it's like Irish farmers as well, you know. They are. There's definitely a type. I think my grandmother is from Ireland, and she had a farm in the UK, in England, in Oxfordshire. So it was. I think that's the image that's probably in my head, is somewhere between the two. Marek says Egwene is more natural way. I don't say Egwene, I say Igwene. And I know you're going to hate me for that, but for some reason that's just how it is in my head. The first time I read it, I just was didn't take egg-gwain. It just doesn't roll off properly. It's like egg-gween. Yeah. Maybe it's just a UK thing, I don't know, but don't hate me. I will work on my pronunciations, but they are staying as they are in my head when I read. Yellow, obviously. Yes, yellow, obviously. You have to join the yellow. And if anybody watching who isn't currently in the community, if you want to come and play as an Aes Sedai, you can sign your name in our novice book. You can start your training. And yes, you get to pick your shawl at the end. We actually just raised, last night we raised Leela Sedai, and she joined the Grey Ajar. So congratulations to Leela, who you also know as Talk Wheel of Time. She is now part of the Grey Ajar, and I understand we're going to have another raising tomorrow as well. I am the current Amrylin seat, and I have no idea which way she's going now. I always quite like the surprise, but there's bets going on. It's going to be a grey or a brown, we think, so we'll see. But yes, if anyone wants to come play, then drop me a DM as well about that. And you're not just limited to the White Tower as Kal-El. You can also join the Warder Yard or the Black Tower as well. Yes, you can. And if you would prefer to play more of a villainous character, we also have the Shadow and the Underworld for people to play in as well. If you are not as familiar with Wheel of Time, actually the Underworld is a really good place for people who are not as familiar, because you don't actually need to know as much, because there's a little bit more freedom for writing for you. So yeah, if you're interested, just drop me a DM and I can help get you involved in that setting. Otherwise, if you want to join our discussion chat rooms, then just drop me a DM and I get you added. The Black Jar says, we are not villain in one turn and we are the norm. Yes, and it only takes once for you. You only have to win the one time. The light has to win constantly and you only have to win one time. But you haven't won yet, so I guess, sorry. Who's getting raised tomorrow? Naran, you have to guess and place your bets. Yes, the betting sheet is open in the Silver Hall chat. Go and place your bets on who's going where and who's getting raised. So, hi, Maximano. Hello. Get raised. Yes, Kal-El. I heard a rumour about Kal-El, actually. I think he might be getting a little promotion inside the Black Tower, so congratulations to Kal-El as well. Who I understand is joining the Black Tower Council, so that's really wonderful too. Yay! And yeah, hopefully then, if anyone wants to continue the discussions, I'm going to ask and find out if someone else can finish reading chapter 1 tomorrow, just for something a little bit different, because at the end of the day, we are not just a page of Weaves of the Wheel that post stuff about Wheel of Time. We're actually, we are a really great big Wheel of Time community. We have so many accounts with from all over the place, and I would really like for you to see the rest of us, not just me, and hopefully maybe I might be able to, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that maybe our Keeper of the Chronicles, May, might offer to finish off the chapter. So fingers crossed for that. If not, if anybody else in our community that's watching at the moment does want to read some chapters at some point, just let me know. Definitely, we'd love to have a few more voices added to the read along. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to leave it there because it is gone 11 o'clock at night and I am pretty tired. I hope everyone's enjoyed that reading. Give me a shout in my DMs if you have any questions about Weaves of the Will, if you have any questions about the books, and if you have any requests playlists for videos as well. And keep an eye out. I'm going to go and update the link in the bio of the Weaves of the Wheel page. There will be a link to the YouTube video for the additional prologue reading of Ravens, and you can speed it up or slow it down however much you want. Thank you. Great work, Ian. Thank you very much, Ren. Thanks for your support as always. And that's going to be it for me. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.